I know I don't speak for everyone, but in my opinion, the Resident Evil community is almost like a spiraling shit show. It's like that moment where you realize imminent danger as a flaming car careens off the interstate. It's quite sad for me to come to this revelation as a fan of the series after its initial conception in 1996. That being said, I know people are going to give me the generalized statement that every community has a few bad eggs. I wholeheartedly agree with that notion, but we're specifically talking about the very core of these issues within the Resident Evil community and how to improve. There's a clear divide among the fan base, with a particular subsection of individuals who wants Resident Evil shaped in their own complementary vision of what the series should be. We had Resident Evil Purists who despises everything that Capcom has created from 2005 and onwards. We have Resident Evil fans who enjoy the series no matter what, and we have a crowd of people who prefers Resident Evil with an emphasis on non-stop action. The truth is, Resident Evil itself as a series was just a giant smelting pot for ideas that boiled over occasionally like any other franchise. It evolved the formula or degraded it into the ground. The main course of the debate with purists is automatically devaluing the Resident Evil series after Resident Evil 0 due to the older gameplay being absent in the newer games. Truth be told, you'd ask yourself what is best for business if you're in the same position as Capcom, trying to appease everyone when you risk appeasing no one. Noting that Resident Evil titles on Nintendo's plastic lunchbox weren't doing so hot. A massive franchise like Resident Evil was either faced with dormancy or success within Shinji Mikami's hands. This is where change came into play. It's easy to say that the crux of Capcom's frequent mistakes and the frequent amalgamations of Resident Evil 4 shifted to an unfavorable focus despite the game being a huge success. Resident Evil 4 wasn't a bad game, but not an ideal Resident Evil game that focused on suspense, survival horror, and a lingering dread of zombies that can kill the player in no time. The idea of survival horror was lost in translation. However, it was this crunch move that kept the money pouring in. It was this move that kept the franchise pushing, even in the wake of adversity, and it was this move that led to the creation of more Resident Evil projects, for better or for worse. If you're going to keep a franchise alive, then don't forget the foundations, but if you make the same old iteration without any refinements, then you'll face the downside of a formula that lacks in creativity. Shinji Mikami, the very man who fans clamor for, also changed the series in hopes of appeasing Capcom and his team. At the same time, there was no other option, causing a great divide in the fan base. I think Resident Evil's identity crisis certainly had its high and low points, almost like any other franchise. There's going to be an entry that makes you wonder,
what the hell is this?
There's always going to be an entry that might be surprisingly good too, and then there's always the middle road.
I have no strong feelings one way or the other.
In this instance, I don't think that going back to roots is bad in this case. It's what Resident Evil needed. It's what I want as a fan. It's almost mind-boggling to see that Resident Evil purists have this mindset that remains persistent to keep hating the games even after Capcom demonstrated that Resident Evil 7 took it back to traditional survival horror roots, while Remake 2 seems to be doing the same thing when you examine the gameplay credentials there. I mean, you don't see the Devil May Cry fan base in complete disarray over a new entry. It's been 10 years since they waited for a follow-up to DMC4 as well, and the tonal shift seems to be completely different with that fan base in regards to the audience compared to Resident Evil purists still hating what they're getting. Survival horror conventions that existed in the originals did carry over in Remake 2. Remake 2 has no ammo drops, no consistent melee attacks, none of this agility crap that was present within Resident Evil 6, even though it was a good feature, and the enemies are as resilient as ever, setting the stage for three-way conflicts between you, the Licker, and a Tyrant, for example. Resident Evil 2 Remake is getting stellar previews, is coming out to positive reception across the board in terms of its presentation and the unveiling at E3 2018. The nitpicking is still feverish, probably due to disgruntled fans believing that this is a smokescreen for Capcom to obtain your wallet. That's what every company likes to do, though. They like to make money. Now, to be fair, Capcom hasn't been the greatest since their decline happened in 2013, starting with, in my opinion, the DMC reboot. That was a dumpster fire, but an objective thinker would probably see that the company has been trying to get back on track for the longest time in the present. If they really didn't care about your thought process as a fan of old school Resident Evil, then why would they even pour money into a remake, which is essentially a passion project? People also make this lingering debate about how 1-for-1 remake should be coordinated and how Remake 2 should be exactly like Remake 1 from a gameplay standpoint, how it should be coordinated to the same gameplay but with better graphics. Even the very definition of remakes don't adhere to that unwritten rule. A remake could be something that could be made again but also made differently to make something similar to the original, while it can be also reinterpreted, and they're calling Resident Evil 2 Remake a reimagining of Resident Evil 2, meaning some things are going to be changed around. For example, if you don't believe that reinterpretations cannot happen of characters and stories that have similar story beats but also a lot of different scenarios going on, then one thing you should look at the most is horror remakes. Look at Friday the 13th, look at Halloween, look at, fucking Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's like the same basic premises with those characters, with those slasher villains, but the scenarios have been reimagined and they have been classified as remakes. A bulk of issues that crop up with this is the idea that purists are being rampant and distrusting, and it doesn't leave much to be desired to give Capcom a chance in the present in terms of just giving either a demo or a game a fair shake anymore. I understand needing more. I understand being absolutely frustrated with a company. I understand common criticism, but a main majority of this criticism seems unfounded. And instead of voting with your wallet, instead of walking away from a series and putting more time and effort into video games that actually appease you, it seems that Resident Evil fanatics just stay around and make outlandish theories all the time, and they make things worse for themselves, and they get more and more angry. The best excuse I heard is Resident Evil 2 Remake is just like RE4, even if the gameplay mechanics are a bit distinct and you can clearly see that there's limited ammo in Remake 2 compared to RE4. So what else could be used as an argument? Ah yes, the lack of fixed camera angles yet again. First and foremost, I think Dead Space 1 and The Evil Within 1 proved that you can succeed with third-person horror and apply the gruesome, otherworldly nature to the aesthetics with ease. Both games accomplish this structure on their own distinctive values. So believe me when I say, anyone saying that survival horror is only synonymous with fixed camera angles is probably lying to you. That's the biggest slice of grade A bullshit I ever heard in my life. We now live in an era of precise controls for the modern era, and camera obstructions are becoming isolated as the time goes on. I'm saying that these games can't just have crappy controls anymore, but they can have those survival horror themes, and I think people are expecting Resident Evil 2 Remake to play just like the original remake with fixed cameras, but they need to finally wake up and sniff the Folgers in their cup.
The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup.
I still love the original Resident Evil games, but tank controls and a fixed perspective was truly a byproduct of the limitations along with the pre-rendered backgrounds. If we're talking about an evolutionary standpoint, then gameplay has to progress to a point where things feel relatively intuitive to pick up and play in the modern era. What might be easy for you to understand with tank controls might frustrate someone else who is used to a dynamic range of movement. I think the best compromise was blending in modernized gameplay with the urgency that Resident Evil was known for. Remake 2 is essentially what RE6 should have been if the cards were played correctly. I don't think that fixed camera is coming back either, unless it's an additional cool mode that might be patched in later, but I don't see it being in the main game. I've already said it before and I'll say it again, we don't always get what we want with personal perspectives, and this style has been dormant for years outside outside of indie titles. Every other game so far has been either first person, RPG, OTS, you name it, but there hasn't been a lot of fixed camera games. And to be fair, over the shoulder and first person outsold the original Resident Evil games, even in this series alone, as the perspectives and genres shifted. I don't want Capcom to go back to their condescending ways. Fan feedback does matter. I think it really did matter when they managed to botch classic Claire for some reason with her redesign. If the company does make really dumb decisions, then I'll be on top of it, like I usually am, but no one seems to believe me. There's a fine line between criticism and obviously nitpicking to hell and back. That feedback goes into accordance with the way it's handled. Regressing back from a seamless mixture of old and new just to take the old gameplay back into account seems like we're taking 3 steps backward, if I'm being honest. Let's just wait and see what happens instead of being harshly negative and frothing at the mouth over simple preferences. There should be something to love for everybody with a video game franchise. Keeping what works and modernizing the foundation of the gameplay along with adding something new to the equation once in a while keeps things fresh for a franchise. Sometimes we have to gauge what changes are good and bad, but sometimes change can have optimistic turnouts. After all, Metroid did convert from a 2D side-scroller to the Prime series, which was a first-person angle, and many people loved those changes. Metal Gear Solid dished the infamous top-down view for a more rotational third-person camera, and that still worked within the confines of what MGS was known for. Grand Theft Auto is also another example of changing the top-down view to give more freedom to the player with a third-person perspective, and they made some pretty damn good games. Vice City, Grand Theft Auto 3, San Andreas, anyone? You see, it's not about the camera, it's not about Claire's face, it's not about any mundane complaints about Ada's trench coat. It's about the quality of a game and what improvements will evolve the series and what impact will it have to stand out throughout the test of time, especially if those changes were made for the better. This is Renegade Operative signing off, and hopefully you guys really enjoyed this opinion piece on what I think about Resident Evil Purists and what things they should do to change their arguments. The stuff I've been seeing lately has been pretty crazy. Again, it's okay to be cautiously optimistic. It's okay to walk away from a franchise if you feel like it, but I think that people staying around being negative Nancy's really doesn't solve much. I think, you know, you can have some reservations, but make sure your opinions are valid and your criticism is legit. Otherwise, I won't be able to take people seriously, like people saying that the RE engine is shit. How? This game is like 4K. This game is like 60 FPS, 1080p across the board on all platforms, I think. So, holy shit, like, I seen some people say some pretty stupid stuff and make some shit up, but I'm kind of looking forward to these games coming out next year, and I want to see if there's going to be like demos. I know there's a demo of DMC5 already. I want to see if there's going to be a demo of RE2 Remake. But this is the end screen, so remember, follow me on social media if you really like this video. Be sure to thumbs up, subscribe, and tell me what you think about the Resident Evil fan base in the comments. Sound off and tell me your experiences with people if you had any. I'm signing out. See you later. Peace.